My wife is Australian, and I did what every Viking does. I went overseas, I took her home. I grew up in Denmark, lived 12 years in Australia, and we then moved back in 2012, started church, Hillsong Copenhagen in 2013. There was 6 of us in the original team that grew to 50. And now we are running church, 7 services across 4 locations in Denmark, Aarhus, Aalborg, and in Malmö, Sweden. That's right, we're sneaking in. And we're Vikings, we cannot help ourselves. And we're having fun, and it's hard work, and it's worth every single hour. It's worth every single, every single drop of sweat and blood that is required of it. It's such an honor, and what God has done over the last 6 years has been incredible. And when we set out to plant that church and plant that room of the house of the house that we're part of, Hillsong Church. Really, I think sometimes we can get caught up in these extremes because humans, we just think in extremes constantly. But, you look at Paul's strategy when in the book of Acts, and really he had a dual focus whenever he went into a region. It was to strengthen the faith of the believers, and it was to grow in numbers. And sometimes we build churches that are, the pendulum swings in extremes, where we are either like, this is just about the Christians, and we build sermons and we build strategy and we have a vision that's about building and strengthening the faith, or the pendulum swings the other way and it's all about, seeker sensitive, even though I've never met a seeker who's sensitive. It's all about growing, and really, if you're a Christian, I don't even want to talk to you. But Paul had a dual focus, and I think we got to build churches where it's not either or, it's both and. That it's possible to build churches in 2019 where you can come in and you can have been a Christian for decades and still get something out of it while you're sitting next to someone who is receiving Christ for the very first time. And those are the kind of churches that we want to build, and those are the kind of churches that we want to see flourish across Europe, amen? Where the Christians, they are being strengthened in their faith, but also that we are growing in numbers as people they're finding Jesus. Today, I got 2 sessions. The second session is a little bit more ministry, type service. But this one, I really want to just get practical, if that's okay. And hopefully just give you some tools that can help you and help us in our day-to-day building of teams and church. The leadership guru, Peter Drucker, he once said, culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I think sometimes we can have in our thinking that there is a divide between culture and strategy. As if these two, they are opposing forces. But strategy really is what guides you, where your culture is what drives you. These two, when they go hand in hand, we are able to accomplish something beyond what we could imagine. And the challenge is this, is that when our culture doesn't line up with our strategy, there is a gap. And the gap is evident and everyone sees it. There's a gap between what we say and what we do. We say we're about this, that's our strategy, but what we do, that's our culture. There's a gap between what we preach and how we live. When we first started church, people would say to us, we're in a context where Denmark has a 1,300 years church history. We've never had a church over 1,000 till now. And, so when we started church, people were like, what's Hillsong like? Is Hillsong like one of those happy, clappy churches? And I was like, I don't know. It's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, we are corporately who we are as individually. And so we really had a saying in the start of our church, just going, we are who we are. And it's like, well, is our church a generous church? I don't know. Are you generous? Are you generous? Am I generous? I guess if we're generous, then yeah, we are generous. Yeah, but are we one of those churches that invite people to come to church? I don't know. Do you invite people? Do I invite people? I guess if we invite people, then yeah, we invite people. And really, it comes down to we are who we are. So you got to be the church that you want to see. If you want to know what your church is like, just go look in the mirror. Because that is the church that you are building. That is the church that you are, because we are who we are. I've spoken in lots of churches where they will ask me, hey, could you speak on evangelism? Could you speak on, I really need my people to bring people to church. And I'm like, that talk is going to be very, very short. Because the question is, who is sitting next to you? As the lead pastor, as the senior pastor, you need to know that everyone who sits behind you, they are looking at the seat next to you. And they are asking themselves, are they bringing people? Because if there is a gap between what we preach and how we live, people, they see the gap. And they will copy how you live way before they will copy how you preach. And so my team, they know the 4 seats behind me, they're reserved for Thomas's guests. So I know I have my own seats that if my friends finally say yes, they will come. And I have my own seats, and the church will know that those seats, they are for Thomas's friends. And so there has to be a realization where we stop trying to look for, how do I get everyone else to do this? And actually just be real with ourselves and ask myself, how am I being an example in this? There's a gap when culture and strategy are not in alignment. There is a gap between what we write as values and what we reward. And it's a simple exercise, and you could ask yourself, as a quick mental exercise, is what have you allocated to of your time, of your energy, of your resources? Because that is really showing what is valuable as a church. We can say, well, we are all about welcoming people and the welcome, we want you to feel welcome, or we're all about the children, we want to bless the children, but the kids pastor has been asking for a budget for 10 years. Well, there's a gap. And the gap is okay as long as you're real about it. And so just as a mental exercise, or write it down and ask yourself, what have I allocated to of time, energy, and resources? Because that shows what your true values are as a church. That's the real culture. No matter what it says on the billboard, no matter what it says on your website, that's the real value. Is that okay? We're going to get real practical today, okay? So please don't hate me. A little bit later, I'll speak a message that hopefully they'll make you love me again. But really, the bottom line is what we reward in public is what people they copy in private. What we celebrate, that's what people go, you know what? I want to be one of those people that get celebrated. And that's why it's so important that we're constantly communicating our real culture all the time. I say to our platform team back home, and that is just to take time as preachers, as MCs, as whatever it is that you do, worship leaders, and figure out what are the cultural words that you want to use. Because everything communicates something. We don't say buckets, we say containers. We don't say we're about to take an offering, we're about to receive an offering. We don't split our connect groups, we multiply them. Because everything communicates value. Everything communicates culture. What are the culture words that make you special? Because culture is what makes you stand out. Your culture words, they communicate that value. And anyone can copy your strategy, but no one can copy your culture. Because that's who you are. So if you really want a definition of what culture is, it's really just how we do things around here. It's how do we do things around here. And really, if there is a strong culture, those who are in a separate culture or bring a separate culture with them, it should stand out. Nothing will stand out and nothing will be out of place unless something is in place. And so the question is, what's out of place? Is negativity, is that out of place in your culture? If someone talks negative about leadership, does that make everyone go, what are you saying? I mean, that sounds like a foreign language. Or does that just fit in? If someone drops something in the foyer or in the auditorium and doesn't pick it up, is that like, what do they do? What's in place? What's in place of culture? If someone says, I'll be there but doesn't show up, does that stand out? Or is that like, oh yeah, well, everyone does that. What's in place? Because that is our true culture, what we do around here. There's a saying in leadership that there's no I in team. There's no I in team. And really the idea behind it is that we have to make sure that my ego, it doesn't get in the way of the team. In Philippians chapter 2, verse 5, it says, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, by being made in human likeness. You see, Christian leadership should be known for the attribute of servanthood. Servant leadership. And servant leadership is about we, not me. Servant leadership is about we and not me. And so much of any team's problem, it starts when I'm protecting me rather than we. When I come in, even as a team leader, I'm trying to protect me. It doesn't mean that you can't inject yourself into the team. I mean, creativity occurs when everyone comes with their own point of view and their own set of gifts and talent, but the focus is the team and not what I bring into it. Think about the last time you had a brainstorming session with your team. So many times, I found myself doing this, brainstorming session, it becomes like a marketing campaign for everyone's ideas. You know what I'm talking about? We have a brainstorming session and we're like, what should we do about this? Or what should we do for Easter? And then you throw an idea out there and it doesn't fly, It just goes out and no one goes, oh, that's awesome. And then someone else says something and they're like, oh, that's great. And you're like, yeah, what about that other idea someone just said? And you're running this little marketing campaign for your own ideas in the midst of the brainstorming session. Why? Because insecurity. Because it's not about we, really, it's about me. And I think every single one of us, we have to get to a point where we just, before we walk into a session, before we walk into a meeting, before we walk into, our job, whatever, before we walk into what we're called to do, just like you would at a restaurant, you check your ego at the door. You just like, this is not about me. This meeting, it's about we. We win. It's not about me winning. It's not about me looking good. It's not about my ideas. It's not about, that I can get a boost in my confidence. This is about we winning. Galatians 2:20, I have been crucified with Christ and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. Imagine having that kind of mentality before walking into a meeting. Because isn't that part of the challenge? Is that so many of us, we would never admit to this. So you don't have to nod or say amen. Just look at your neighbor and go, he's definitely talking about you. But so many of us, we use our meetings to boost our own egos because we just riddle with insecurity. And so we want everyone to go, that's a great idea, Pastor. And they're like, oh my God, But imagine if we could just check our ego at the door. So that when you walk into that meeting going, no matter what happens in this meeting, I'm still called. This meeting says nothing about my calling. This meeting says nothing about, what God has called. It says nothing about my value. Promotion doesn't come from the east or the west. Promotion comes from God. Imagine walking into every meeting where you come to serve rather than to be served. You will come for an opportunity. How can we build our team rather than for the team to build me? If I walk into a meeting like that, now I'm no longer fighting for me. I'm fighting for us. So if we're looking to build us, if we're looking to build our churches and, really we are only in place to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. So I think all of us, we have to realize, I have a whiteboard here. I will use it eventually. I'm afraid because once I dive in, I can't leave it again. But we have to realize that everyone in our churches have one of three things, and some people have more than one, something to offer. Everyone has either got time, talent, or treasure. Everyone in our churches, they can either bring with them and offer into the service time, talent, and treasure. And I believe it's our responsibility as leaders, as pastors, as department heads, is to create pathways for people to bring their time, talent, and treasure. What would you do if someone came to you and said, hey, I've got 18 hours to give every single week. Is there any way I could serve? Have you got something that just requires time? Or you might have someone that, he's a successful lawyer, she's a successful lawyer, and says, I can't give you time, but I can give you half an hour a week as a lawyer. I'm bringing my talent. Or a musician, I'm bringing my talent. I might not have a lot of time. I have no treasure, but I have a talent, and I'll bring my talent. What about people in our churches? They have treasure, finances. Sometimes, fortunately, it's changing, but In a lot of churches still, we almost treat people with finances as lepers. Because they come in and they have finance and we don't know what to do with it. Because we get awkward. And it's like, oh my goodness, like this person, he's offering his finance. You should have a pathway for that person. Why should we discriminate against people who have finances? The Bible is very clear that the power to create wealth comes from Him. It's a gift from God. So just like if someone came to you and said, hey, I play the guitar, what would you do? We have a ministry for that. Hey, I edit videos. We have a ministry for that. I'm a graphic designer. We have a ministry for that. I am good at creating wealth. We have a ministry for that. We should give people a vertical dimension to every area of their lives. To actually add purpose to what they have been given. Because people, they want purpose more than they want profit. And they're looking for an opportunity, and because the church has been so bad at creating opportunities for them to give their finances, so they create their own foundations, they find all these different things that's happening around the world, rather than, hey, your finances can make a difference. Tell the story. This is what your finances have done. That person, that marriage, that building, these children, those youth ministry over there, all of that is because of your giving. Create pathways for people's time, talent, and treasure. So how come we don't involve people? I think there's two main reasons why we don't involve people. First, they're not as good as us. They're just not as good at us. And so we're like, oh my gosh, I don't know, like I could do this better. But you got to realize the people you have in your church right now, they are in seed form. They don't look like the tree that they one day could become. They don't look yet like the flower that one day they could become. They're just in seed form. And you look at that seed and you're like, I don't know. But the only way to find out what's inside of that seed is to plant it. It's to nurture it. And it's to give it time. To give it time. That teenager that's sitting on the back row picking his nose and, not paying attention, that's your future youth pastor. But he's just in seed form. You get him in a healthy environment, you give him time, and something is going to come out of him. Something good is going to grow out of him. But we don't involve people because they're not as good as us. Or we don't involve people because they're better than us. Well, how does that look? If I put them in place and they preach better than me, they lead better than me, they worship better than me, they're better at doing, what is that? I mean, that's not, can I just say that insecurity? It just means it will never get bigger than you. The experts say that we are only able to maintain 120 relationships in our lives, which really means that if everything bottlenecks with you, your church will never grow larger than 120, which means that the next person that joins, someone else will leave because you don't have the capacity to look after that person. It's not your job to know every person in church. It's your job to make sure every person is known. That doesn't mean that it's you, but you got to free yourself from that small church mindset where you have to know every person, you have to have coffee with every single person, you have to hold every person's hand. No, you just got to make sure everyone is having a coffee and everyone's hand is being held and someone is out there looking after them. I say to our team in Copenhagen, I say, the goal of our church is that in any given service, on any given Sunday, I should be able to point at any person in the room and say, excuse me, could you please stand up? And someone of our team should be able to tell me everything about that person. That should be the goal. It should be the goal that not a single person can walk in and walk out without someone connecting with them. The larger we become, the smaller we have to get in terms of capturing people and reaching people and serving people. But insecurity says, well, they're better than me. You got to put that thing to rest. You got to put that thing to death and allow other people to flourish around you. Imagine what we could accomplish if we didn't worry about who got the credit for it. So you find these people, you find these amazing people. For all you visuals, I think what we're looking for is first of all, we're looking for their capacity. How much can this person actually carry? And in order to find capacity, there's two things that you're looking at. You're looking at their hand. That's their outer skill, like what they're actually good at. You look at their hand, and then you're looking at their heart. Their heart is all the internal, their DNA, the culture. How much do they carry us? How much do they carry our church? If you find someone who's not very good at what they do, and they don't really know our church and don't understand us, well, obviously their capacity is very little. Then you might find someone who's very good at what they do, but they're brand new to church. They don't understand our DNA. Well, obviously it's very limited. It's very limited how much you can give them. They might be the best person. I mean, someone might knock on your door and say, I'm a super nanny. I would love to look after your kids. And here's my CV. I mean, their skill is out of this world, but you don't know them. I mean, those of you who have kids, you understand. You will say yes anyways, but whatever. Come on now. But really, I mean, that's sometimes what we have. Someone will come in and say, whoa, this guy just joined. He's a professional musician. It's like, yeah, cool, but do they understand who we are? Or then you might have someone who has they're all hot. Come on, we all have those people. They're all hot, but they're just not good at anything. Again, very limited. It's amazing how these people, they find themselves in positions of influence. They're just like, oh man, they're just so loving. They're just the greatest people on the planet. It's like, yeah, but why is he mixing sound? He's deaf, It's just, it's weird. And obviously, the aim is to give them lots of capacity, to get them to that point. I think all of our responsibility is to look at our volunteers and our staff and our team and figure out where do they fit. Because this is not a static thing. You can actually move people. You can move people into that area. You can actually grow people. Now, I think what most of us we think that the answer to everything is a cup of coffee. I just need to have a coffee with him and he'll be sweet. If a guy cannot mix sound, it doesn't matter how much coffee you pour into his throat. That is not making him a better sound engineer. Okay? If they cannot sing for the life of them, I don't care if you are having English breakfast tea with them every single day, that's not going to make them a better singer. So if it's the skill level that is needed, what they need is training. Just pure, good old-fashioned training. Half an hour in the auditorium, an hour in the auditorium, order pizzas, make it fun. All right, this is a sound desk. That's the volume. Do not touch that, Work it out for them. Now, if someone is skilled, but it's the heart that is lacking, that is when you have your coffee. They just need time. They just need time with you. They just need to understand who you are and what we are about. So you find these people, and then we got to position them somewhere. We got to find a place on the team. And really, there's three things that you're looking for to position them onto the team. You're looking at what are they good at, their skill. What are they passionate about? And then the last thing is, what's the need of church? What's the need of church? So classic example, someone comes in and they are a kindergarten teacher or they're a school teacher. And every single senior pastor, I've not yet met one that doesn't lack or doesn't need more kids workers. And so whenever you hear someone is a teacher, your eyes light up. You're like, Jesus is truly alive. And so that is their skill. And there's a need. But this poor teacher has not had an adult conversation for 20 years. The last thing she wants is see another child on a Sunday. So, I think there's some teachers here today because there's a lot of nodding going on. Our responsibility is to find out what are you good at, what's the need, and what are they passionate about. Or someone might be a great, wood carver. They're just passionate about it. But you're like, you know what? We just don't need any wood carving right now. I mean, maybe we can do something for Easter and it'll be great, or someone is really passionate about something. I'm just such a great worship leader. You need worship leaders, but, it's great. So, I think what you got to realize is that you can have 2 out of 3. You can have the school teacher, but if you get 2 out of 3, you get short-term passion, but long-term frustration. So really the aim is when you sit down with them is to have the conversation. Hey, what are you good at? I'm good at this and this and this. Oh, great. What are you passionate about? I'm passionate about this. And that one is a bit, that's something that you got to work on, because obviously we want to build a culture where people, they're going to be passionate about the house and they will serve where the need is. Do you get what I'm saying? So you have the conversation, what are you good at? What are you passionate about? Well, you know what? We have the following 5 areas where we could use a person like you. And now we're finding the grace zone. And then what we would do is that you would have then conversation of managing the expectation. If you don't communicate that expectation, I think that since we are drawing now, I think the difference of expectation equals frustration. If you have any area of your life where there is frustration, it's probably because it's unmet expectation. If I join the team, Pastor Steve is going to call me every day. He's going to prophesy over my life. He's going to call me just before I go to sleep, and he's going to sing me to sleep. That's a great expectation. And I actually have heard he does that to some of the team, but then you join the team and there is frustration. So what's the answer to this? Well, you bridge the gap, very simple, through communication. And so real simple, you just have the chat. So what do you expect out of this? What can we expect from you? And then this is what we expect. And then I know it's so simple. Then you agree on the expectation. And I would encourage you to write it down, have a social contract. Just write it down. Saying, all right, so you're saying this is what, okay, 1 song a month. I'm going to call you 1 time a month. I'm going to sing you to sleep just once a month, okay? You agree on that. And then I think this one is super important. You do a timeline. Do an end date. And so we'll say to our team, hey, why don't you do it for 6 months? Do it for a year. You pastor this service for a year. And then in a year, we have the chat to see how we're going. It gives them an honorable way out, and it gives you an honorable way to move them. And and if it's the school teacher that's caught in the kids ministry is this mysterious place, isn't it? Young people walk in, old people walk out. It's like, and so so if you have this school teacher who has agreed to serve for a while, give them some light at the end of the tunnel. Saying, hey, why don't you do it to August, okay? In August, we sit down and then we talk. They might have got passionate about it in the meantime, or they might say, I'm good now. You're honoring them, they're honoring you, and they will continue to serve. Yeah? And so you agree on that expectation, you put the end goal, and if we is more important than me as we're building all this, there's 3 things that I think that we need to build in our culture that we say no to. And the last 5 minutes, I want to just talk about the 3 things that I think all of us have to say no to in our culture. This is a mantra in our church, and I think it would be helpful in your church as well. Number 1, say no to excuses. No to excuses. We're talking about ownership right now. Extreme ownership. Say no to excuses. And basically it is saying it's on me that we succeed. So if someone above me, and we're just talking structure here, we're not talking value, we know that. If someone above me makes a mistake, obviously I didn't brief them good enough. If someone alongside me makes a mistake, I don't go, well, that's on them. No, I should have seen that. If someone underneath me makes a mistake, I didn't lead them well enough. It's on me. And you might say, well, wouldn't someone burn out thinking like that? Not if we all think like that. If we all think like that, we all step in. There's no us and them. There's no them and us. No. We are all in this together. It's on me that we succeed. And I think excuses is a little bit related to regret. That if you can plan your way out of it. Hindsight is looking back and go, we should have, could have, done this. But if you have insight to look into your past and learn from your past, you can have foresight. That's why assumption is one of the greatest, enemies to leadership. Just no excuse. I don't know how many times people say to me, come summer or like a school holiday, and then you're down in attendance, and your team writes to you going, oh yeah, it's school holiday. I was like, oh, did they just spring out of nowhere? Did we not know that this was coming? Maybe there was a school holiday they just decided on last week. Did we not see that coming, kids ministry? Is that really, that just came out of nowhere? It's like, oh, look, a school holiday. No, it comes every year. Oh, the same week every year. Are you saying the same challenge to church growth comes every year it comes around? Yeah, it's cool. How about we plan for it? I mean, I know it's a crazy idea, but how about we plan for that for next year and actually have an idea of how to lead through it? No excuses. Number 2, no elephants. No elephants. This is big. In our church, we say no elephants allowed. It's about authenticity. And we went through a season for about 6 months where I would finish every single meeting going, so is there any elephants in the room? You guys, you seem a little bit tense. Any elephants we need to talk about? Because elephants, they don't start big, they start small. We feed them under the table. So it was really awkward meetings because I was like, come on, is anyone hiding an elephant? I'd create an elephant by talking about the elephant. And it's like, so you ask the question, any elephants in the room? You gotta kill the elephants. And the only way to kill an elephant is with an awkward conversation. But we don't like awkward conversation, it's confronting. Let me just say, if you don't like awkward, this is a bit harsh, just love me. If you don't like awkward conversation, you're not fit for leadership. You're not fit because leadership is just a string of awkward conversations. It is. But how come we don't confront? Really? It's because we don't love people. Because if I love you, I will confront you about what is limiting you. I will point that thing out and say, excuse me, that attitude, it's not just hindering you in church life. That's going to hinder you in your relationships, at your workplace, with your friends. So I will confront what I see. Awkward conversation. And you know what? It is so much easier to move an elephant when it's little. You leave that saying, I'll go away by itself. No, it will not. It will grow. It will get bigger and bigger and bigger. And now, instead of just one-on-one dealing with an elephant, now we've got to have the whole team involved. We've got to have experts come in. We've got to have other people come in to deal with this elephant. It's so big now that it's affecting everyone. What's the elephant that you've allowed to grow in your team? And let me put this one out there. Sometimes you're the elephant. Sometimes I'm the elephant. And we've got to create a culture of safety where we invite feedback, where we can actually ask the question, hey, am I the elephant in this conversation? Is there something in my leadership that is hindering you doing what you're called to do? Because if I'm the elephant, let's talk about it. It's awkward, especially if you pay them, if they're on staff. But you've got to have a safe culture. It says in Mark 10 that Jesus looked at the rich young ruler, he loved him, and he told him what he needed to hear. That's what we need. We need a team where we can love people, we can look at them, and we can tell them what they need to hear. And the last thing, no excuses, no elephant, and no eggshells. No eggshells. Basically, don't be complicated. We cannot have a culture where people just walk around being complicated. Yes, there are seasons. I get that. I'm just going through some stuff right now. I get that. But when it carries on for 6 months, it's like everyone's trying to deal with your personality and someone's diva and whatever. It's like, no, let's get rid of these eggshells. Let's deal with the elephant. Let's get rid of the excuses. And let's just get to the core root of the issue and the problem that we're facing. No eggshells. And it's really just a question of asking the people around you, am I that person? It says in Hebrews, obey your spiritual leaders, recognize their authority, for they keep watch over your soul without resting, since they will have to give an account to God for their work. So it will benefit you when you make their work a pleasure and not a heavy burden. That happens when there's no eggshells. Is that okay? All right. Thank you.